What if I told you that the past doesn't create the present, but the present creates the past? Let it sink in. It sounds very deep, but I'm going to explain to you what I mean with this. Let's say you're young and something happens to you, and you experience it through the lens of a young person who probably feels scared, probably feels uncertain, and does whatever is needed to protect him or herself. And then we carry those stories into our adulthood and we may shape a whole narrative about that person or that situation. But we, as adults or just people that are aware, get to create the story that we want to tell. And so I personally found out, I think I was like 38, found out that I've been telling this very negative story about a person in my life who is close to me for a long time, to the point where I'm like, you know what? I basically have been rejecting this person for as long as I can remember. And I just don't want to do that anymore. Let me be the love that I wish to have received. And I just, in that moment, started to just accept that person exactly as he is. I was single for like 5 years until I met my past relationship back in Holland when I was on holiday there. And we ended up breaking it off because of the distance. He still lived in the Netherlands and I live in Mexico, and that just didn't work. So eventually, when that person heard about that, the remark was, well, you don't seem to be able to keep a relationship. And I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel the need to explain that that's not kind of how it went and that's not really kind of true. I just accepted it and I felt nothing because what counted for me was that I accept that person for who he is without trying to change him. Not only did that set me free, it also showed me that love truly is more powerful than anything else. It's this energy of not trying to control and change other people. And of course, you still have the chance to accept how much of a reach they can have. But it's like, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to change you. I don't want to defend myself against you. I honestly just accept you for who you are. And because I expect you not to change, that's what I accept too, you know? And I don't have that with every person in my life, but I'm grateful that I have it with the right people. And I'm also grateful that by already knowing that I can make that decision, I get to shape my life accordingly and the stories that I get to tell. Because it's so easy to tell stories where we used to be the victim. But every story actually became my hero's journey. Every story, even though it was hard or maybe even beautiful and ecstatic, but it eventually shaped me into who I am. You know, like a lot of times I say this to people. It's like, okay, let's say you have a father who is a criminal. And then one son says, well, I became a criminal because my dad was a criminal. I learned from the best. And then the other son says, well, of course I became an amazing, present, good dad and an honorable man who makes his living in an honorable way because my dad was a criminal. He showed me exactly what I should not become. It is the story we tell ourselves that shapes our reality. And sometimes we are not conscious of it, that we're still holding on to old stories, old narratives that are not doing any justice to our younger version and definitely not doing justice to our older version. So we get to tell that story now. Like, okay, what story do I want to tell? Because there's so many people that, because they had little, created a lot for themselves because they were driven by this feeling of, hey, I have to work for this. You see this a lot with women, you see this a lot with colored people, you see this a lot with people that come from a poor background. They have this inherent power of wanting more out of life because they came from less. That becomes their hero journey. If they had everything, they probably never really had that drive. I actually know someone who actually said that. He said, I always had so much love from my mom and dad, especially from my mom, that I never felt the need to really get everything out of me because I didn't need that drive, you know? And I'm like, that's really shitty. That's really shitty for you. Even though he had a beautiful, amazing life, right? He had beautiful childhood that he couldn't complain about. He always had all the love and the presence that he needed. Um, so again, it's the story we get to tell. Our the worst thing could actually be our biggest blessing. But it's like, do you want to look at it that way? Do you want to look at it that way and treat it that way? And then nothing can really touch you because, and I told that to my son too. It was a funny thing where they came from gymnastics class at the beach, and my son was on his bike and a few other kids too, but most of the kids at school, they were walking. And so the teachers were like, hey, the ones on the bike, walk with the bike, don't bike. But one of the kids was still biking. And then my son said, yeah, I wanted to bike too, but every time I wanted to do that, they would say something to me, but they left him alone. And I said to him, and I was laughing, I said, you know why? Because you're a real good kid. You're not that rebellious. And so they know to expect better from you. And I said, I had the same thing at work. At sales, I would have people in my team that were not always performing well, and then I was part of the people that was always performing well. And sometimes there was this new account that was there, a client that just called in and they needed to buy stuff from Dell. And they would just hand that deal to one of the least performers, one of the less performers. And they would just give that, we called it a bluebird. They would just give that deal to someone that wasn't really performing. And in a way that felt very dishonest because it's like, well, why would they get it? Because I work my ass off. I have a higher target. But the story I told myself was, no, it's because I'm one of the stronger ones. And they trust that I can do this also without the help. That's why I don't get it. That's the story I told myself. And that way of thinking can bring you so far. This whole thing is about not being a victim of your story anymore, guys. The moment we become victims of our story is the moment where we not just lose our power, but we lose our peace, we lose our joy. And there's one position I just don't like being in, and that is to be the victim. And so, going back to the start of the story, when I start to tell a new story, when I got that comment from that particular person about my relationship that ended, I didn't become a victim of that remark because it didn't touch me anymore, because I accepted him for who he is. I accepted he's never going to change. I accepted that he believes and sees whatever he wants to believe and see. And I was good with that because I love him anyway. I cannot be touched. When you don't want something from someone, when you just accept that person for who or what he is or what she is, you're untouchable and you don't become the victim. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in tomorrow's episode.